you are. I am Dr. Vivian Ugrala, a lecturer in the Department of Languages, Faculty of Arts, National Open University of Nigeria, Abuja. I am your online facilitator for the course ENG453 Language and National Development. Welcome to week 4 of your online facilitation. Last week in week 3, we looked at knowledge of Nigerian language families. We said that some languages in Nigeria are classified as major languages and others are classified as minor languages. The major languages are Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba. They are so classified because they have many speakers and they occupy a wider geographical location when compared to the minor languages. This week in week 4, we are going to be looking at development, theories of development, and Millennium Development Goals. Thank you.
This is my email, bugala@noun.edu.ng. If you have a question, send me an email and I will respond promptly. Intended learning outcomes. At the end of the lecture, you are expected to know what development means, theories of development, some terms often confused with development, and Millennium Development Goals, popularly known as MDGs. Week 4. Our focus is on Module 2, Unit 1 to 3. Guzman 2011 defines development as the accumulation of human capital and its effective investment in the progress of an economy. What is human capital? Todaro 1989 defines human capital as productive investment embedded in human beings. This includes skills, abilities, ideals, health, and so on that result from expenditure on education, on-the-job training programs, and medical care. Thus, human capital refers to those attributes, the possession of which makes a person a useful member of society. Anyone who possesses these attributes, a mechanic for instance, an honest accountant for another, is more in demand than one who lacks them. Activity 1. You need to answer this question. What does development mean to you? You have to answer the question before proceeding to watch the remaining parts of the video. The shortcoming of Guzman's definition is that it treats the human person as a means to an end. If Guzman sees human improvement as important element of development, it is because she considered it necessary for attainment of economic progress. What this means is that no person has worth simply because he's a person. One's worth depends on what one can do, on what one can contribute to economic progress of one's country. So Padro and Smith, 2011, define development as the process of improving the quality of all human lives and capabilities by raising people's levels of living, self-esteem, and freedom. So Padro and Smith, 2011, emphasize human person at the center of development, unlike Guzman, who emphasized economic progress. In Padro and Smith, we identify an effort to improve the human person, not because of what can be gained from him, but simply because he's a human person. It can be said here that man is properly instituted as the subject, goal and reason for development, and not its object. So Padro and Smith's definition emphasizes 3 dimensions as constitutive of development. 1. Economic dimension. 2. Psychological dimension. And 3. Social dimension. Now let us look at the history of developmental studies. Many disciplines now feel that to justify their existence, they have to prove what contributions they make to development. Part of the poverty of the colonized countries was attributed to the fact that they were colonized by the richer countries. Most scholars agree that the poor nations need to be helped out of their poverty. The suggestions offered by scholars to tackle development challenges facing the poor nations of the world led to the emergence of development studies. Now, let us look at terms often confused with development. The first is growth. Growth and development are closely related, that even well-versed scholars at times feel that the two terms convey the same meaning. That when you say development, you are also saying growth and vice versa. There is also the argument that growth and development mean differently. Abdul Najar, 2009, says growth is increase in size or number. This definition captures the inner meaning of growth. The final thing we can say about growth is that it is quantitative increase. Abdul Najar, 2009, avers that development is increase in degree of organization and specialization. That's increase in complexity. From the above submission, it can be deduced immediately that development has to do with qualitative change and improvement on the capacity of an agent, human being, institution, and so on, to act or perform its function. The next term is westernization. Westernization is the process through which non-Western nations, countries, or people are meant to adopt Western practices and cultures. Westernization rests on the assumption that the type of development witnessed in the Western world is possible simply because of the culture, material and immaterial, of the Western world. Thus, transporting such cultures to other lands will help such countries replicate the level of development attained by the Western nations. Scholars have pointed out the preposterousness of this position. They argue that it is wrong to equate westernization with development. China is a proof that development is not westernization. China rejected the offer of westernization and continued to search for development with its Confucian ideals. Today, China is counted as one of the developed countries of the world, and this was achieved without westernization. So what this means is that development is not the same thing as westernization. The next term is modernization. This is a term often used interchangeably with development. A good example of this usage is found in Stacy Piggy's 1996 study about the Nepalese who hold the general belief that being modern is being developed. Despite widespread use of this understanding, modernization is not development. Modernization is built on the claim that there are universal values which all thinking men are expected to model their lives after. The belief that such values exist is known as universalism. This thinking is the root of Greenrock's 1992 postulation that modernized is to become more scientific and rational in the service of mankind. Thus, to model a country's life after such values, science and reason is regarded by proponents as proof of development. Modernists contrast their values with traditions. They hold that while the universal values which they espouse are products of reason, traditions are products of prejudices. Critics of modernization are quick to point out that modernization is another name for westernization. A scholarly movement known as postmodernism warns that there are no such things as universal values. According to postmodernists, every society developed its values in order to meet its existential challenges. Thus, the so-called universal values are an attempt by Western Europe to impose its own values on the whole world. Now, let us look at terms that capture the underdeveloped status of a country. The first is third world. I'm sure you've heard this term before. The third word is a term that is used on underdeveloped nations. The term's origin can be traced to the Cold War that was fought between the Western nations and the Soviet nations. Another term is periphery. This is a term that is also applied to underdeveloped countries. Opposed to this is center or core, ascribed to developed nations. We now look at critics of development. First, development is imposition on third world countries. The proponents of this view hold that development is an instrument of control imposed on third world countries by Western nations in order to control them. Another is development is based on evolutionary model. Another is development entails expansion of capitalism. Unit 2, theories of development. We have so many theories of development. The first is Adam Smith's theory of specialization. Next is Auguste Comte's law of 3 stages. Roto's theory of 5 stages. These stages are the traditional stage, the precondition for takeoff into self-sustaining growth stage, the takeoff stage, the drive to maturity, and the age of high mass consumption. Unit 3, Millennium Development Goals. These are popularly known as MDGs. They are a set of 8 goals adopted by the United Nations in the year 2000. They are, first, to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, to achieve universal primary education, to promote gender equality and empower women, to reduce child mortality, to improve material health, to combat HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, to ensure environmental sustainability, and to develop global partnership for development. This is according to Todaro and Smith, 2011. Of course, you all know that the MDGs have been replaced by the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Sustainable Development Goals are 17 in number. So, in this lecture, we have looked at what development means, some terms often confused with development. Then we've looked at the MDGs. So what I'm going to conclude this lecture by saying is that note that the effective use of language is very important to the development of a country. Do not forget the title of the course, Language and National Development. When you use language effectively, you are adding to the growth and development of your nation. Thank you. So activity 2. Why do you think some countries are classified as underdeveloped? You have to answer this activity. Thank you.